Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar, me pueden decir Alba. El canal se llama Seriela, estamos aquí para hablar de libros y algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar, you may call me Alba. Channel name is Seriela, we're here to talk about books and some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. So, today will not be books in Spanish from Puerto Rico. Today will be how I judged for the Booktube prize. And I will link all the instructions and the description of the Booktube prize in the description box below. Sorry about the noise, but it's around 4:30 in the morning here, and you're not supposed to be out on the streets until 5. So apparently the police are doing their job outside because apparently some people have been out and about. Probably people who have to go to work. So yeah, I hope things are going well with you, especially those on the front lines who have to deal with the public every single day and put themselves in danger. So what happened with the Booktube prize? I have watched a few of the judges and how they go about very aptly, right? From the bottom, because you're supposed to rank from 1 to 6, 1 being the number 1 ranking and 6 being the lowest. And people usually go from the bottom up, but I'm going to go from the top down, so that you'll know right away what my top books are, and we'll discuss them later. So, and I'll put them here because 2 of the books were unscripted, so I got to read those right away. My number 1 pick for nonfiction Group C, is Solitaire by Albert Woodfox. Number 2 is The Collected Schizophrenias by Esmé, Weijun, Wang. Number 3, Maid by Stephanie Lan. Number 4, Imani, Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. Number 5, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And number 6, 3 Women by Taddeo. Okay, so let's get into my process, right? Number 1, Solitaire by Albert Woodfox. If anybody has been following me, welcome to the new subscribers. They will already know that one of my projects that has started already is what I call the carceral canon. And this book by Albert Woodfox fits perfectly into my carceral canon. Albert Woodfox was in prison for 45 years, 43 of those years in solitary confinement. Now, Albert Woodfox originally went in, and he admits it, for armed robbery. He was a ne'er-do-well as a young man in Louisiana, and he was jailed a couple of times. The last time being for armed robbery. But while he was in jail in Angola, a guard was discovered dead. And Albert Woodfox and 2 of his fellow inmates were framed for that murder. And the book is essentially a chronicle of how these inmates, these 3 inmates, struggled to prove their innocence for 43 years. while in solitary confinement. I found it, as often I find the carceral canon, inspirational and oddly parallel to our lives, supposedly outside of jail. This book moved me to tears. It is very long, but not as long as 45 years in jail. And it details the frustration of people who have to deal with the supposed justice system that we live under. So that was my number one pick. Yeah, very socially relevant book. Number two, The Collective Schizophrenias, which is a series of essays written by an Own Voices writer who has been diagnosed with a form of schizophrenia. As it turns out, she's a researcher. She was a researcher in a lab at a university while this was going on. So she has firsthand knowledge of, for example, the Bible of psychiatry, which is the DSM-5. And she very aptly demonstrates the conflicts that there exist right now between that Bible of psychiatry and the NIMH, which is the National Institute of Mental Health, if I'm not mistaken. And their differing stances on the definitions of schizophrenia, which is something completely entirely new to me as a lay person, and she speaks to that, how the general public is taught to view schizophrenia. And so this was an entirely new and well-researched book about a new vision of the collective schizophrenia. So that's why it got a number 2. I thought it was a very, very important addition to our information about mental health. Yeah, from a person, Own Voices, a person who has gone through it herself. Number 3, Maid. Let me tell you right off the bat. Maid, put on the timer so I don't go too far. Maid by Stephanie Land, Breathe by Imani Perry, and In the Dream House. I have them right here. Maid by Stephanie Land and Breathe by Imani Perry and In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado were basically ties. And what separates them is like a hairline. And so I just had to go by my subjectivity about what is more relevant to me in the nonfiction sphere. And in that case, well, I had to pick Maid for number 3, because, you know, the first 3 are the ones who, the books that proceed to the next round of the Booktube Prize. And I had to decide between those 3 books, which one I would have liked to see continue. And for me, it had to be Maid, because of this young mother's ordeal trying to survive. It opens with her and her daughter in a homeless shelter, and they have to leave because their time in that homeless shelter is up. And that's just the beginning of the ordeals that they go through being a poor family in the United States at this time in history. That's all I have to say. It was gripping. She's a very good writer, and it was like, I compare it to Evicted. Yeah, it's one of those very important books about something we rarely see in the commercial media. Yeah, that's why Maid is number 3. Although I also loved Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry, which also speaks to something that is very important to deal with, especially for young Black boys, all Black families, all families of color who live in this system and have to deal with systemic racism. Yeah. Except that, frankly, Imani Perry waxes very philosophically, and academia is written all over this. So that's why it fell a notch under Maid. And even though In the Dream House also deals with a very, very important topic, and that's domestic abuse, in this case, between a same-sex couple. I did not deal well with the writing style here, and the footnotes, frankly, confused me and boggled my mind. And even though it gripped me and was suspenseful in the way that she describes how domestic abuse grows and how it becomes worse over time. Did a very good job with that. But the style was not for me. So, the last one, I'm going to put it here because it was unscripted, was the first one that I read, and that's number 6. And I hope you will I hope you will humor me as an okay boomer. Maybe that's why I could not stand this book. I could not stand this book. It was infuriating. I had only read a few pages of this book before I wrote an email to Robert of the Booktube Prize and asked him, is this a nonfiction book? Who in their right mind would consider porn nonfiction? And it's good porn. If you're looking for erotica, if you're looking for voyeurism, by all means, get this book out of the library. As I said, I only had access to the Scribd digital version. So I had no access to blurbs and overlap pages or whatever, you know, the blurbs that come on the dust jackets. All I saw was that it had to deal with women's desire. So here I am thinking that it has to do with women's desire to be ambitious, women's desire to be creative, women's desire to to have fulfillment in life, even spiritual fulfillment. So I was very much surprised first when in the introduction or the prologue or whatever, she mentions that her mother every day allowed a man to follow her as he was masturbating. Okay. Then she proceeds to make sweeping generalizations about women, before the book even starts. We pretend to want things we don't want, so nobody can see us not getting what we need. And I wrote in my margins, these are my notes that I had started taking for 3 women. Who is this we? Who is this we that she's talking about? White women? White American women? White privileged women? Okay. And in my margins, what does the act of this man masturbating behind her mother have to do with her mom's desires? Was she insinuating that her mom wanted to be assaulted and followed by this man daily? Yeah. And that was basically my attitude throughout this book. Infuriating. Just infuriating. Is this nonfiction? How? Why? Or is this soft porn? Or is soft porn nonfiction? Because later on, I read somewhere, I think in the afterword or somewhere, that she considered herself embedded with these 3 women that she followed for years. Well, she had to be literally embedded in bed with the descriptions that she gives. So, would I recommend this book? Yes. If you want to have a hot night with your partner, sure, go right ahead. But that's all it is. And I was so glad to get it. This takes forever. This takes forever. It's never ending. When is it going to end? That's how I read this book. Could you tell how I feel about it? I deliberately wanted not to watch other Booktube videos about this book until after I got this off my chest. Yeah. So seek them out. There are people who love this book. Fine. Go right ahead. I can see a definite use for it. Definitely. A definite use for it. But not for me as a book on women's desires. It is definitely a book about traumatized women in pain who seek release, who seek to medicate that pain and that trauma through sex, as some people do through carbs, or through books, or through binging on streaming sites. There are different ways of self-medicating. And in this case, she has used the lives of 3 women. And what infuriates me the more is the young teenager. I truly, truly hope that the proceeds from this book, part of them go to treating the trauma in that young woman's life. Okay, So that's all. I think I should stop here. I want to have a good day, a good weekend. Sorry about the rant, but I had to get it off my chest. I will leave all the links to the Booktube Prize, a link to a couple of videos about this last book, good and bad. And I'm also going to leave a link to the Netflix series About Us with Morgan Freeman, because in the first episode, there's an interview with Albert Woodfox, which almost made me cry again. Very moving book. Thank you, Robert. This was a unique experience. I'm looking forward to the next round. I'm learning a lot. And so I hope to see you again soon, people. Take care. Keep on reading. Cuídense mucho, mi gente. Los quiero mucho. Adiós.